Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing today? Good, good. Well, my name is Scott Ward. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect with Amazon Web Services. I work on our partner team based out of Seattle, and I work with our security technology partners on the solutions they provide up for our customers to use and consume on AWS. I'm joined here today by Pat. I'm going to let Pat introduce himself, and you'll see me back a little bit later.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Pat McDowell. Like Scott, I'm a Partner Solutions Architect here. I focus on our security ecosystem, both our ISV partners and our consulting partners and our MSPs. So thanks for coming to GPSTEC304. We wanted to give you a little bit different talk than your normal GuardDuty talk. But before we jump into that, how many people here, your principal job role is in security? Awesome. How many people here has security forced upon them and they just want to run away? All right. There's enough fun in here for both sides of the aisle there. Anyone heavily using GuardDuty on a daily basis? All right. So we wanted to give the story because we always say that GuardDuty, if you go to any GuardDuty talk, we kind of say, oh, GuardDuty detects something, you do something cool with Lambda, right? Yes, Lambda does a lot of cool things. You can update your security groups, but that's not really how security incident response works in the enterprise. So we really want to give you the end-to-end story of how to integrate GuardDuty with the rest of your tool sets. A lot of people didn't realize that GuardDuty, when it launched last year, re:Invent launched with about 15 partners. We are adding more every month. And it's really how you integrate GuardDuty alerts into your daily security workflow. So I spent my first 3 years in security working in a SOC. So I never had a dashboard look this great before. But a lot of people I talk to who are heavy Splunk users, this is pretty ideal. What it really looks like, for me, at least on a daily basis, was something more like this, where you're playing a game of whack-a-mole. For every mole you kill, 3 more appear. You go to hit and nothing's there. It's a false positive, and you're just drowning and drowning and drowning. So that's one of the guiding principles that we dealt with GuardDuty. We really want to help you build that needle in the haystack, right? Or rather, find that needle in the haystack. So when you combine GuardDuty with partners, you really kind of supercharge your abilities to get rid of those false positives, to kill and exterminate all those moles. So we're going to walk you through the end-to-end narrative of a SOC analyst responding to a GuardDuty event, but also how you can think about risk and cybersecurity incidents across your entire enterprise, and how GuardDuty with our partners is the central thesis there. So this is basically the partner list that integrates with GuardDuty. We're adding more and more all the time. I want to just say, we're going to talk very deeply about some partners in here. I don't want everyone to think those are the best partners. It's quite frankly the ones that me and Scott know the most because we worked with them a lot in previous jobs, or we talked to them a lot, or we're more comfortable with things. We didn't want to have a situation where we're doing a live demo and not really know the product too well. 2 partners I do want to call out here are CrowdStrike and Proofpoint. They're actually natively built into GuardDuty with their threat intelligence feeds. So we use their threat intelligence in GuardDuty to help enhance our detections. But first, let's talk about what GuardDuty Detect and how we can expand that out to the enterprise. So I'm going to talk about some moles. So the first mole we have right here is Recon Rachel. So if you put something on the internet, everyone knows it's going to get scanned, it's going to get hammered. So you might see your SSH brute forces, your RDP brute forces. It's pretty common. A lot of false positives come that way, but that's kind of the first part of the attack chain that GuardDuty can help detect. Now, weapons, if you get a little bit more advanced, you actually have some malware on your host, on your EC2 instance, or your unusual traffic. Well, GuardDuty can detect connecting to a C2 or a command and control botnet. GuardDuty has those detections in place with our partners. Now, going down, we have our friend Exfil Eddie here. So DNS exfiltration is a very prevalent attack technique in the wild right now. Basically, you're masquerading, data you're stealing from a customer or an enterprise or victim as legitimate DNS traffic. But it's really not. It's just masqueraded as that. GuardDuty has those detections. Most people have DNS open to the outside world, so it's a pretty common vector to try to withdraw data from a victim. We also have our friend Sneaky Sally Mole. maybe they're connecting to your AWS environment via a Tor exit node, and that's pretty much something you don't want ever to happen. So that's something you want to draw attention to quickly and exterminate. And last but not least, I'm not sure if this is still the case because the last 2 weeks the price of Bitcoin has plummeted, but anytime AWS credentials were stolen or accidentally put on GitHub, people typically want those to mine Bitcoin. Use your resources for free, spin up a very large amount of EC2 instances to mine Bitcoin and maybe make some profit. That's, again, something that GuardDuty can detect fairly well. So we want to keep whacking these moles. It's not the end of the story, but then 2 more appear. So that's when our partners come in and help supercharge GuardDuty to help you with your mole problem, essentially. So it's Vegas, and we're all here to party. And nothing says party like talking about academic cybersecurity frameworks, right? So when I go to Replay on Thursday, I'm going to start talking to everyone in the audience about the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's going to get everyone really pumped, and it's going to make the Vegas trip, let me tell you that. But I think it's really important how to think about GuardDuty and our partners to get that holistic approach to security in your enterprise or your company. So at AWS, we have a lot of frameworks, right? But it's very AWS specific. NIST is, from our partners and our customers, it's kind of becoming the de facto standard of how to think about cybersecurity and cybersecurity risk across your entire enterprise. And it's built on 5 functions. So those functions are identify, right? So you can think about that. How can I identify my risks? What are my assets? Protect. I want to put in guardrails against low-hanging fruit. I want to prevent an incident before it happens. Detect. I would like to be able to detect a cybersecurity incident if my guardrails have failed. Respond. Do I have the appropriate capabilities to respond to a cybersecurity event? And recover. If there is an event, can I recover? Do I have business continue? Can I continue my business? What's my downtime? What do I have to report to the authorities even? In AWS, our frameworks kind of include well-architected framework. That's how I build well on AWS. And the cloud adoption framework, which is kind of my AWS journey as I mature. But this is a framework for cybersecurity. If you're a hybrid cloud, if you have end users on laptops, it's for your entire enterprise. So I'll map how AWS services and our partners can help you supercharge this as well. So if I identify, you can think about this as visibility in AWS. So this is AWS CloudTrail. This is VPC flow logs. This is our DNS logs. All 3 of those things feed into GuardDuty. That's where GuardDuty gets its detections from. But then you have things like Amazon Inspector. You want to know if your assets have CVEs that can be exploited. And maybe that's important. Maybe you don't care if your dev systems are on patch until next month, but you really care about production. So you have to understand your risk across all your environments. And AWS and Fig, that can tell you the history of your assets, all your assets. With Protect, you can think about that, the guardrails, let's prevent things from even happening. So, your security groups, your VPC private networks, AWS WAF, you might want to prevent a SQL injection attack, AWS Shield and Shield Advance. How can I protect against a DDoS attack? As well as IAM, I have the right credentials. And Detect, again, is going to be the main thesis of GuardDuty. That is central to detect and respond. We see most enterprises and ISVs focus on detect and respond, and as they get more and more mature, they move towards protect and put those heavy-handed guardrails in. And also on Detect, we have Amazon Macie. Amazon Macie is kind of a DLP for the cloud. It can find sensitive data in things like S3, as well as give you the ability to recognize unusual access patterns to that sensitive data. So respond, I said, everyone likes to talk about, I use AWS Lambda to respond to a GuardDuty event. Most security practitioners I talk to, they can't or won't want to use Lambda. They want to use something like a SOAR platform, like a Phantom Cyber. Maybe they don't have time, haven't learned how to code, or they want something more turnkey and off the shelf. We also have AWS Systems Manager that can query your fleet wide. And again, recover. This is more about AWS regions and availability zones and how I can be resilient, how I back up my data between multiple regions, or how I can restore data if there is an event, if there is an incident, or who I can even page for that reason. So I talked about how academic frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity framework, that's kind of the big party framework. But sometimes people don't like the party; they're more pragmatic. I talked to some customers who are like, Pat, I don't care about these frameworks. Just tell me how to block all this Bitcoin mining in production centrally via my tool sets already. I don't care about the NIST. I need my IPS and my firewalls to block this in production centrally. How can you help me? GuardDuty is not part of my central workflow yet. It's not integrated with my existing tools. So I'm going to go back to party land again and tell you how our partners integrate with GuardDuty across this entire spectrum. So now this is the partner point of view. So, and these are all partners that have been integrated with GuardDuty. So you have Identify, you have the Alert Logics, Redlock, Dome9, McAfee, Turbot, and Evident.io. And once again, for the visibility aspects, we have our threat intel partners, Proofpoint and CrowdStrike. Protect, many people have enterprise firewalls they want to keep using. They have centralized transit VPCs, so they're using Palo Alto networks, they're using Fortinet Checkpoint, they're using Trend Micro's deep security IDS and IPS. They want to be able to have a GuardDuty alert feed into there. And again, Detect, I have Splunk, Rapid7, Sumo Logic. Those are my SIMs, my centralized logging. I want to enrich GuardDuty alerts with other data and find a super finding. Respond, Phantom Cyber. That's probably one of the hottest names in security right now. How I can automate all these tools without using AWS Lambda, or how I can or additionally Dome9, Redlock, or maybe just PagerDuty. Maybe I just want to page someone who would manually do something. And again, Recover, we have our storage partners, but again, AWS Regions and AZs, the well-architected framework. We're going to really focus on Detect and Respond and Protect, and not so much Recover, but it is an important aspect here. So besides these frameworks and talking to SOC analysts to do it, what are some more pragmatic ways or functional ways of looking of GuardDuty augmentation? So how do you centralize? Again, these are the Splunks and Sumo Logics of the world. How do I enrich? I don't really understand these findings. I'm not a full-time security person. Tell me what this finding means. Enrich it with other data. So Alert Logic and Redlock are really great with that. Or I use Splunk to maybe I need to compare it to something else in my environment already. How do I prioritize? Which alerts do I care about? They all seem high priority. They all seem scary to me. So maybe I want to use my threat intel sources. CrowdStrike says this is more important than this for X, Y, or Z reason. Redlock says this is in production. Alert Logic says, this needs to be addressed right away because it feeds into many different resources. Again, how do I respond? I don't know. I don't have SSH access. I need a SOAR platform. I have runbooks already. I want to use these runbooks. I can't write Lambda. And how do I prevent? Again, I just want to prevent this from ever happening to begin with. So I want to block the incident before it occurs with my enterprise firewall. So when everything's high priority, you can't separate it through. So I'll peel back into this real fast. So how do you prioritize GuardDuty events? So first, again, GuardDuty will rank it on a numerical scale as well as high, medium, low. Obviously, if it's high, you want to respond to that. Threat intelligence. Is CrowdStrike saying this is a really bad person, a known threat actor that's in your environment doing things to it? Data classification. Is this a GuardDuty alert on your crown jewels, or is this in dev? You obviously want to respond to something that's affecting sensitive data well before you respond to something in dev or test. Environment classification. I don't care about dev. I'm keeping the lights on. I have way too many moles, way too many alerts. I need to focus on production. I don't care about dev. And again, correlation with a novel outside event. Let's say Trend Micro told me there's an alert at the same time on this asset as GuardDuty, or I noticed that an admin user was created around the same time as this event. That's something I'm going to look at a bit more than a random alert when it's paired with something that's also concerning. So this is talk about scale across your enterprise. So I'm going to hand this over to Sky. He's going to tell you how you can scale your threat detections and architectures for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Quick reminder, everybody, welcome to take pictures, but all these slides will be available on SlideShare in just the next couple days. If you take a picture of Pat or I, there's a small fee, and you can see my agent in the back. So there's a lot of value to be gained in turning on GuardDuty and integrating GuardDuty with your partners. However, it's important to keep in mind how you can actually architect with GuardDuty so that you're making sure that you're optimizing for yourself and for your partner solutions the ability to actually consume findings and respond to those findings. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and just highlight an architecture pattern that may be valuable for you to help you deal with scale, multiple accounts, and multiple partner solutions. So start with here we have our master account. And in this master account, we have GuardDuty turned on. This master account represents where we have decided that we want to consolidate all of our GuardDuty findings that are generated from other accounts in our organization. This is probably not our master billing account. It's more than likely probably our security account, where our security team has access to all the other things that are going on security related in our organization. We have a couple of child accounts that have been created, and we've turned on GuardDuty in those accounts as well. And then we're going to use GuardDuty's standard functionality for the master account to send an invitation to those child accounts. Whoever's in charge of those accounts is going to accept that invitation. And now GuardDuty is linked up between all of these accounts, and all of these child accounts will actually send a copy of their findings into this master account. And whoever's in the child accounts can still see what's going on with the GuardDuty findings in their account, but that master account is going to have visibility into every account. So now some things that we didn't want to happen are potentially happening in our child accounts, and they're sending their findings onto GuardDuty, and we once again have more moles to whack. We use GuardDuty's standard functionality, which is integrating with CloudWatch events. So every finding that gets detected in GuardDuty, we can have immediately and automatically forwarded on to CloudWatch events. And then we can link CloudWatch events up with various actions. I've got 4 examples here: Lambda, SNF, SQS, and Kinesis streams. And then from those actions, we have our findings arriving into our partner solution. Now, if we use something like Lambda or SNS for our CloudWatch event, we actually are probably pushing that event directly into the partner solution. We might also, depending on the partner, they might also be just pulling SQS on a regular basis to find out if there's new findings and consume those and bring them into their solution. Some of our partners also might just choose to use the APIs. So GuardDuty has a full set of APIs on top of it where you can actually just go and query the findings on a regular basis instead of having them forwarded on to you. So some partners are actually just looking at those APIs and consuming that data on a regular basis. So now that we've got everything kind of architected so that all of our findings are feeding place as far as our master AWS account, and then we've got them routing on to one or many partner solutions, what happens next? What happens when all that data is actually in the partner solution? Well, there's lots of different things that could happen, but one possible item is that we've got employees that are coming in, they're doing their analysis, they're in some sort of a dashboard on top of the partner solution, and they're learning about what are the current events that are being reported. They're doing some sorting, they're doing some searching, they're doing some prioritization, they might even be enriching that data, and then they may decide that they want to take action against that particular finding for the account that's having the bad behavior. And that partner solution can actually just push a response against the appropriate AWS account to rectify the problem, to maybe alter the resource or isolate the resource, depending on the action we want to take. Now, this is very generic. Some partner solutions don't have the ability to respond. They're more focused on making that available to you, or their response option might actually be to integrate it with another tool. So the point being here is that by thinking about this architecture pattern, you're going to put yourself in a position to better be able to consume all of those GuardDuty findings in one spot and enable your partner solution or partner solutions to be able to consume all of that information from one centralized location. So Pat showed us a few slides ago that NIST cybersecurity framework, and on the far left we had Identify. So Identify is really focused on how are you going to go out and get a better understanding of the systems, the people, the data, and the capabilities that exist within your organization as it relates to security and how you're going to manage that security risk. So with AWS and GuardDuty, a lot of that identification is focused on how are we going to identify these things that are in my AWS account that are tied to findings, and how am I going to make sense of all of that data? So one of the areas of identification is really to know what are your assets and what's the purpose of those assets. And having that information available to you is going to enable you to make more informed decisions around prioritization and risk. So when we talk about AWS, some of the things that you want to know: well, how is my data classified? Where do I actually go and get the data that's going to tell me about this particular thing and what its purpose is and why it's here and who's responsible for it? What am I going to prioritize? Now that I've maybe invested in some classification, I have a little bit more information around how I might prioritize how I'm going to react to this particular GuardDuty finding. So GuardDuty gives you prioritizations already, but by ensuring that I'm marrying that up with how I'm classifying and understanding my assets, I have an even stronger ability to actually prioritize things appropriately. This is going to help me assess ownership. I want to know ownership. I've got a finding against a particular resource. I want to know who owns it. I want to know who I can go talk to after the fact to say, hey, I had to resolve this. I need you to correct this going forward. Or if I have further questions, I need to know who I can talk to. And I want to understand the relationships of various things in my environment. If I have one particular asset that's tied to a GuardDuty finding, I want to understand what its relationship is to other things that are in that environment. If I happen to take a response against this particular resource, where are the impacts later on in the environment? Am I actually going to impact more things by taking a response action against this one particular asset? So the most common things that I see customers that really enables them to be able to do this deeper level of identification around their assets is having a strong tagging strategy. So nearly every AWS service gives you the ability to put a key value pair on your AWS resources that gives you more information about what's the purpose of that particular resource. It could be a cost center, it could be a project, it could be the environment, dev, test, or prod, it could be what compliance body it's tied to, HIPAA or PCI. Could be who owns that particular resource, et cetera. Whatever makes the most sense to you. But I definitely recommend investing your time and resources in figuring out what a tagging strategy should be for your organization and actually enforcing it so that you can leverage that information and make more informed decisions related to your GuardDuty findings. So once we have that in place and we actually have figured out how to classify our assets and we've identified how we're going to do that, there's some things that we can actually identify at a much lower level of detail with our GuardDuty findings. We can actually figure out what's the purpose of this instance. I have more data that tells me who owns it and things like that. I'm going to be able to understand where the instance comes from. Once again, I understand who owns it. I may have the ability to now kind of dive deeper into config management or change management databases because I have enough information to link the two up to understand why is this thing here in the first place. I'm going to be able to understand what account this is from. So remembering back to that architecture we saw a few slides ago, GuardDuty can be sending findings from multiple accounts into a single partner solution, but GuardDuty maintains the source account number. So if I have some sort of a mapping that says which AWS accounts go to which teams or which applications or which environments, I have a better understanding of what account this is and potentially what's the impact of a finding for this particular account. I'm able to identify who's actually causing this finding. Is it an internal or an external resource? I can actually figure out, is it my stuff that's actually causing this, or is it an external entity that's actually causing this finding against my AWS resources? I can actually understand how long this has been going on. So GuardDuty is going to tell me, when was this finding first seen? How long has it been going on? How many times has it occurred? But I might also have enough visibility now because I understand how my assets are being classified and I know what metadata I'm going after to actually know how long has this resource been here in the first place and how does that line up with how long GuardDuty has been seeing this finding. We get a little bit better information on how this happened. So GuardDuty is not going to tell me how a particular finding happened. It's just going to tell me that a finding is there. But now that I've got more information on the actual asset and the classification, I have the ability to more easily use AWS config or CloudTrail to get a deeper understanding of the API activity history against that particular resource. And then I can also start diving deeper into the specific ways that I deploy and manage my infrastructure and my services to understand maybe when was the last deployment, or is this a brand new application or service that maybe needed a little bit more attention or wasn't addressed appropriately. I can start to better identify risk through my GuardDuty findings. I now have what GuardDuty is telling me and what their opinions are about this finding and the priority of it. And I can combine that with all of the classification that I've figured out as far as what's the purpose of this thing, who owns it, what's the environment, what's the overall risk to our organization for the finding that's happening against this particular resource. And I have ability to better prioritize based on the source of the intel. So I may actually decide that I want to prioritize findings higher because they've come from CrowdStrike or Proofpoint versus another third party who may be reporting security incidents from GuardDuty. So going a step further, now that I've figured out how I'm going to identify my assets and how I'm going to classify them, there's some things that I can go even deeper to actually identify these things and take action on them with my partners. So you could just let GuardDuty consume findings and into your partner solution, and you can just look at them in your partner solution. And that's going to give you some value, but partners are actually working to give people and customers a deeper level of insight around those GuardDuty findings so they can take the appropriate action. So these partners are actually ingesting all the tags and the metadata about your AWS resources. So if you've identified and you're sticking to that tagging strategy, you'll often find that your GuardDuty partners are pulling that information into their system so you can use it. They understand what the metadata is about your particular resources, all the various pieces of information that AWS makes available, and they're consuming that as well, so you can make more informed decisions. Partners are going to give you some of the partners give you better observation of traffic patterns. So you may have a GuardDuty finding, but these partners, some of them are actually pulling in VPC flow logs or have an agent on the instance that's actually giving more information about traffic patterns. So you can actually go and see, this thing had a GuardDuty finding. Who's it been talking to? What else has it been talking to? When did it start talking to this thing? To get some more insight into why this happened and what the impacts of it might be. Some of our partners have their own threat intel teams that are actually out there doing research on their own about what's going on the internet. And you can actually take the information that GuardDuty is giving you and do a deeper dive into the source of that particular finding to have a better understanding of who is this or what is this and what is the potential risk to my organization. You know, a company like CrowdStrike, for example, has their hybrid analysis tool where you can actually go in and plug in an IP address and get more detail about that particular IP address and what they and others have seen about that address on the internet. And finally, partners are going to give you more visibility around the operating system. So AWS GuardDuty uses VPC flow logs, DNS queries, and CloudTrail, but it can't see what's actually going on in the operating system of your EC2 instances. That's due to the shared responsibility model where you have full ownership and control of that operating system. But the partners we work with do offer you the ability to have agents running on that instance that they combine with your GuardDuty information. So for example, McAfee, with their cloud workload security product, they actually discover workloads in your accounts, consume GuardDuty findings, consume VPC flow logs, and give you detail about the workloads in your account, the flow of the traffic for them, and where you're seeing GuardDuty findings. But then McAfee, that product has a connection into their ePolicy orchestrator, which is an agent on your EC2 instance. So now they have the ability to actually give you more visibility around what's going on with that operating system, what's the patch level, what's the security policy applied to that instance, and even enable you to be able to take action at the operating system level. So here's one example of a partner that's doing that, consuming all that classification information and giving you more ability to take action on it. So this is Redlock in this example, and I have an instance that has a GuardDuty finding. Redlock's giving me more detail around some of the traffic and the fact that it's communicating with some suspicious IP addresses. On the right-hand side, you can see it's pulled in all of the metadata related to that particular EC2 instance. And one of the really important parts is that they've pulled in all the tags related to that instance. So as I'm investigating or looking at a particular incident, I have the ability to make a more informed decision because I have more detail about this particular instance that's going to help me to assess risk and priority. Going a little bit further down, there's also going to be an alert summary here, and that alert summary is going to allow me to dive deeper into actually seeing the GuardDuty finding related to that particular EC2 instance. And with that, I'm going to step away for a minute and hand it back to Pat to talk about Protect, and I'll be back in just a little bit.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah, as I was saying before, prevent and detect go hand in hand. And as you get more mature with detect, you kind of naturally go more in prevent. It's not just the precursor to detect. So let's quickly review what we mean when we talk about protection or prevent and am I protected? Again, the native AWS examples are, am I protected from a DDoS attack? Yes, we have AWS Shield for that. Is my data encrypted? You know, your data is protected if it's stolen, if it's encrypted, right? If they do not have your encryption keys, that data is useless to an attacker. That's why encryption is considered a protective feature. Is access to my data governed? Do I only have read-only credentials? I can't change anything. Now going to the partner side of things, can I prevent malicious traffic inbound and outbound using my enterprise firewalls from Fortinet and Checkpoint and Palo Alto? Or can I just prevent the exploitation of a known CVE with, say, Trend Micro's deep security IPS system? So we'll move into detect, and then we'll get into a reference architecture of how this all comes together end to end. So first of all, you have to enrich GuardDuty to get the full picture. GuardDuty is just one aspect of the attack narrative. You have many different tools, and defense in depth talk of that entire attack narrative. You have network intrusion detection systems. A common question we're asked is, GuardDuty a replacement for my current favorite IDS? No, it's that chocolate and peanut butter story. It's a better together story. It's not mutually exclusive. You should be using both. GuardDuty can do some things that your traditional IDS cannot do. It's highly optimized and focused on AWS. Again, you want to combine those GuardDuty alerts with your firewall alerts, with your WAF alerts, with, say, user behavior analytics, as well as endpoint and compute events. Because if you recall, I never once said GuardDuty prevent anything, right? GuardDuty can only detect. That is why we depend on our partners to have that full detect and prevent and protect story. Again, you're going to want to centralize GuardDuty findings to a SIM. That SIM can combine those into a more of a super finding, so to say, get the full attack narrative. And it's all about ongoing iteration. GuardDuty has lots of new detections coming out on a monthly basis. Most recently, new ones for crypto mining and Tor about 2 weeks ago. So I started off with Splunk. I'm going to talk about Splunk now. I know it's very heavy in the enterprise, in the SIM space. So we're going to talk a bit more about why when I think about SIMs and detection, I think about Splunk. It's because Splunk has really leaned into AWS. They have native AWS integrations for high ingest, high velocity of alerts, not for only GuardDuty, but for many different security products. Specifically using Kinesis and Kinesis Firehose, which is the only vendor I know in the industry who are using that with their SIM. So it's using AWS native services to get additional benefit of high ingest rates. So as you know, we have Amazon GuardDuty. All right, then we have Amazon CloudWatch and CloudWatch events. All GuardDuty findings are events. I can then send this to Kinesis and Kinesis Data Firehose. If you don't know what Kinesis is, you kind of think about it, managed Apache Kafka. It's not quite one-to-one, but it's streaming data, high ingest speed. Think about terabits a second of events being pumped into Splunk using Kinesis and Kinesis Data Firehose. Not only that, Kinesis Data Firehose has a built-in integration right into our AWS console with Splunk. You say, use this Firehose to pump into Splunk, and then what it's going to do, it's going to use an elastic load balancer to spray to what Splunk calls HTTP event collectors, right? You can think about this as a scale-out mechanism, almost like a website. Everything it's streaming in from GuardDuty is JSON blob, so it'll span out, and then feed it to all the Splunk indexers, to your Splunk clusters that are in each AZ. So it's because of this scaling architecture that Splunk is excellent at meeting the needs of most enterprises out there, more so than ingest rates of your typical SIM vendors, because it is using Kinesis Data Firehose in this reference architecture. So that's the ingest, but how about I'm an analyst? What else can Splunk do for me once I've had this detection? Well, there's kind of three main components of Splunk. There's the vanilla Splunk, right? But then you can install some apps on it, and those apps include an Amazon GuardDuty app, a general AWS app, as well as something called Splunk Enterprise Security, which is kind of the highest level SIM for security integrations out there. So when you have Splunk Enterprise Security, it kind of goes through this filtering mechanism. So it starts with GuardDuty, it goes through Splunk and Splunk Enterprise Security, and then you can eliminate that mole. And I'll show you, and I'll pivot through the kind of process that a SOC analyst might go through. So right here, this is the GuardDuty app in Splunk. As you can see, there's critical threats in the top right, shows you what assets are being hit, have GuardDuty alerts, and like with all security features, has a global map. So as a SOC analyst, you might be looking at this GuardDuty mechanism first, and then you have a high critical alert. And then you might want to pivot into the AWS app because it might have EC2 information, or you want to see other aspects of your AWS usage there. Or you might want to focus on these port probe findings and then drill into Splunk Enterprise Security. So right here we have Splunk Enterprise Security, which is their intrusion center right here. There's many, many different partners besides GuardDuty that can feed into Splunk Enterprise Security. This is so partners like CrowdStrike, Trend Micro, Symantec. It has nothing to do with GuardDuty, but a lot of security teams are using Splunk Enterprise Security to fuse these together, because there's a common format that Splunk expects partners to pump into. And because everyone's using that transformed format for Splunk Enterprise Security, it lets you mold all those discrete findings into one attack narrative, so to say. But let's get back to GuardDuty and say, I want to turn my detections into preventions. What else can you do for me, right? What are all these partner products that you listed on the GuardDuty page actually going to do? I have all these different tools I want to use. So we'll go through that as well. So right here, GuardDuty Alert, it's a CloudWatch event. We've established that already. But once I get the event, I don't want to write Lambda. I want you to just take care of my environment. I want it integrated with my partner products. So we have the event. It can then either go, say, AWS Lambda, or you can run a Phantom Cyber playbook. But what I think is really cool here, so once Lambda parses it, all these partner products have various APIs that can be called, right? So I might call the API, because I need to prevent at the host, I might call Trend Micro Deep Security. Trend Micro Deep Security is an agent, an IPS agent that could be installed on my EC2 hosts or my containers in EKS and ECS. And then I can just block at the host via, GuardDuty says high severity alert. I'm going to block this at this host, automatically hands off, just because you tuned it that way. Or you can say, hey, I'm not using that, or I'm using all these, but I want it blocked at the edge. I don't even want this to get into my environment. So I want to update my firewall rules. So I can say GuardDuty alerts automatically update Palo Alto networks to block all these detections that GuardDuty set. So if GuardDuty says it's bad, update my firewall rules. I don't want to have to go in there and micromanage it. GuardDuty can help with that. Even more cool, since GuardDuty is not just focused on the data plane in the network, it doesn't have to see network traffic. It's also looking at CloudTrail and IAM users. Those are things that firewalls cannot detect. But say there's unusual activity in AWS CloudTrail from an IP address. Those are things that Palo Alto, Fortinet, and Checkpoint haven't even seen yet. But there could be suspicious activity on the management plane, right? GuardDuty will still send an alert for that still to the Palo Alto, so even before they get in the network path, there can already be firewall rules in there. And it's because those mechanisms and those API mechanisms that really supercharges GuardDuty and takes it to the next level and lets you integrate with tools you're already using. And again, if you're not a Lambda expert, you don't want to tear everything together, there are some playbooks in the Phantom Cyber community made by partners like Booz Allen Hamilton for incident response in AWS. Which you can feed them into GuardDuty. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott, who's going to talk more about that response, more about those Phantom Cyber and SOAR platforms.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Cool. So at this point, we've focused on identify, protect, and detect. Now let's talk about what's something towards the far right side of that framework around respond. So respond is really focused on making sure that you have the processes and the procedures in place to contain a potential security event in your organization. And respond is a really interesting area, especially in the last couple of years, because there's been a big focus on this automated response. Something happens, a Lambda function fires, and it's all good. Everybody has a different methodology as far as how they actually want to respond to a security event. Some people are very aggressive. And some people are very passive when it comes to how they're going to respond and with the level of automation that they put into their security events. So we're going to talk a little bit about that process and highlight a few key areas where partners help out in that space. So to start off with, let's talk about how do you respond? Well, one is you could do nothing. You could turn on GuardDuty and just let it generate findings and just kind of never go there and just hope that they go away one day. You could respond with humans. So in this case, you've got humans that are going in, they're looking at the GuardDuty findings, they're looking at all that classification stuff that we talked about earlier. They're going in and pulling in any additional data sources they might need. They're assessing and determining risk and priority, and they're ultimately going out and resolving the issue and taking action. Or you could invest in some automation. In this case, you've got machines and code that are actually ingesting all of this information. They're pulling in all the classification. They've got some rules that are actually helping them make a determination as far as risk and priority and determining the appropriate action. And they're going out and actually executing on that particular response. For the sake of this conversation, we're going to assume that do nothing is not one of the options. And we'll focus on the humans and the automation. If you really want to talk about do nothing, though, you can stay around later and we'll have a chat. So the humans and the automation thing, what do they need? Well, they need data. So we've got the GuardDuty findings already, but we also need the data. We need the data classification around the asset that's tied to this particular finding. We might need log data from both the application and the operating system that this finding is actually tied to. We might need some additional threat intel. We might need some other information that is unique to our organization that's going to help us determine what's going on. We need tools. GuardDuty is going to give me a finding. I might need a tool to ingest that finding. If I'm going to go log dive into the application of the OS logs, I might need some sort of tool that's going to allow me to dive into those logs quickly. If I'm going to do some forensics on a particular EC2 instance, I might need some tools that are going to allow me to go do a memory dump and do the appropriate analysis. I need some tools that I can actually use to help me make some determinations and take this incident through its appropriate workflow and respond to it. And then I need permissions. I need permissions to get at the GuardDuty data. I need permissions at all the other data that I might need to help formulate a decision. And I need permissions to actually be able to respond to this particular incident. And permissions is interesting. You can decide, I'm going to just give the human or the automation tool permissions all the time. And they can go and do what they want. Or you might want to scope that down and say, I'm only going to give you the permissions you need when you need them, and invest in a process that's actually going to enable that temporarily while those permissions are actually needed. So think about how you're going to do that. So Pat mentioned SOAR briefly when I found out we were going to do a SOAR slide. I spent a lot of time trying to find this picture. I always knew it had to be a dog, but I had to find the right picture. SOAR is a Gartner-defined term: security, orchestration, automation, and response. SOAR's out there to help solve some gaps. Pat mentioned earlier, I don't have the people to write the code, so I'm going to leverage playbooks. There's lots of different solutions out there that fall into the SOAR space, many of them AWS partners. They provide you these baseline workflows or playbooks that allow you to actually workflow a particular incident in your organization, to fold in the pieces that you want, to put in the appropriate stop steps and say, hey, let a human look at this before we actually take it any further. They're helping to solve a talent gap and give you a single pane of glass. The talent gap being, I don't have people that have all the skill sets, or I don't want to keep having all these specialized people. I want to be able to use a centralized group of people, and I want to have everything available to me in one tool. So if we take an example of what SOAR in action might look like with GuardDuty, we've got GuardDuty going into a SIM of our choice. That SIM is then going to take the alert or a human looking at the data, and the SIM is going to send it on, and it's going to go off to the appropriate SOAR platform that we might be using. The humans have access to that SOAR platform, and underneath that, some sort of a workflow or playbook is going to be assigned to that particular security incident. And it's going to be walked through the various stages. Some decisions are going to be made. There might be a point where it says stop, let a human come in. There may be some other decisions to say, look, let's pull in some other data that's actually going to allow us to enrich this and make a better decision on the path that we're going to take with this particular security incident. And ultimately, we'll see some sort of a response come out of there. It could just be straight calls against AWS APIs to do some various actions to isolate or contain a particular security event, or it could be feeding that information off to another partner solution. And that partner solution could just be holding the information, or that partner solution could be doing some action as well. For example, the prevent steps that Pat talked about a few minutes ago. Building on that, when it comes to responding, when I talk to partners and customers and the ability to respond in an automated fashion, with Lambda being an example, they're all enthusiastic about it, but it's often like, how do I get started, right? So I know what I think I want to do, but are there already Lambda examples out there? Or if I'm a partner, how do I get that in front of my customers so I'm not going out there and rewriting it? That's a big question and a big challenge I come across a lot. And one example that I've seen that's helping to solve and bridge this gap is with CloudBots.io. So if you're a Dome9 customer, you may be already familiar with this product, but CloudBots was put out there by Dome9. It's an open source project. You can go find it on GitHub. And CloudBots is out there to help solve that getting started with response challenge. They offer up a bunch of pre-created Lambda functions that you can use to respond to security events in various ways. If you're already using Dome9, it knows how to send off any alert findings or responses automatically to CloudBots, but it doesn't have to be just Dome9. So the way this works for auto-remediating findings from GuardDuty is that, we'll use Dome9 as the example because they're the ones who created this project. There's going to be some sort of a compliance rule or a failure or a GuardDuty detection that shows up in Dome9. They're going to send a notification off to an SNS topic that's running in your AWS account. That SNS topic's then going to forward that message on to a Lambda function that's part of the CloudBots deployment. That Lambda function is going to pull apart that message and figure out what needs to happen, what kind of response needs to happen based on this particular finding and message that you're giving me. It's going to take action against that resource in your AWS account based on the response that you said you want to happen. If you're running multiple AWS accounts, it can also work against multiple AWS accounts. So you can once again have a response from a centralized location against many AWS accounts if you're taking that multi-account strategy. And then optionally, that Lambda function can then reach out to another SNS topic, and the purpose of that being to actually notify. Tell somebody that I actually took action, cut a ticket, send something in the Slack, whatever you want it to be, to really kind of close the loop and make sure that all the right people and parties are informed that this event happened, we took action, it's all good, though you can go back to sleep. So how does CloudBots enable this specifically to GuardDuty? So CloudBots gives you a syntax to actually map GuardDuty events to CloudBot actions. So there are currently over 40 different GuardDuty actions or GuardDuty findings, and there's 28 different actions that are currently available with CloudBots to take action against various AWS resources. And so you can actually map a GuardDuty finding to a CloudBot action so that anytime you send in a particular GuardDuty finding to your CloudBots install, that it will take and run that appropriate action for you. So the way this works is CloudBots gives you a simple CloudFormation template. You're going to give it two parameters. One, your email address, and two, the GuardDuty mapping that you want to map GuardDuty findings to a remediation action. It's going to create a CloudFormation stack. It's going to deploy a bunch of Lambda functions into your account. And the way that GuardDuty mapping is represented, it's just as an environment variable as part of your Lambda function. So you can change that over time. You may decide, I now want to take this action against this GuardDuty finding, or I have more GuardDuty findings that I now want to take action against. You can update that CloudFormation stack, or you can change the mapping in the environment variable either way. So some further uses around CloudBots. This is all open source. It's deploying Lambda functions into your AWS account. If you have some preferred ways or some ways that you like to respond that are not part of that Lambda function deployment, you can add your own Lambda functions into this overall deployment and use those for the way you want to respond. Or you can actually even try and contribute back to the project. Just work with Dome9 and say, hey, I've got some other things I'd like to add in here. You can also use CloudBots for remediation from other security products. That entry point into the CloudBots deployment is just an SNS topic. You could actually use your own internal tools or other security tool if they support sending stuff to SNS to just send those messages to your SNS endpoint, and all that other CloudBots workflow I talked about can still take effect. Sometimes our customers just want to know what's happening. I just want to know that these things are going on. I've got an awesome set of humans. They're very good at responding to pagers. They're very good at seeing the data. I just need to know that something has happened, and we'll figure it out from there. So one of our other partners on the GuardDuty side is PagerDuty. And they recently launched a specific integration for GuardDuty where you can actually choose GuardDuty as an integration source for your service. And then you can actually use some key GuardDuty information findings to help correlate and classify the events that are actually running, showing up in your PagerDuty install. So the way this works is pretty straightforward. You're going to turn on GuardDuty. You're going to configure GuardDuty to send its findings to a CloudWatch events. You're going to forward those findings onto an SNS topic, which is then going to forward to a defined integration URL that exists in your PagerDuty account. And from there, you get to use all the PagerDuty goodness that you've grown to know and love. You can view the incident in your PagerDuty install. You can do all the work to reassign, to escalate, to triage, build your own rules, et cetera, within the PagerDuty application. So another way for you to get visibility into what's going on in your account and position yourselves to actually be able to respond to those particular events. So when it comes to the remediate, to the respond and the automated response, a word of caution: make sure that you understand if automation is really right for you. I've heard of a few examples where customers rush into the automation, they turn on auto remediation or auto resolving of security incidents right away, and the scope of what actually gets resolved or addressed through the response is bigger than they actually expected, and some things that shouldn't have been touched get touched. So take a step back and maybe make sure you understand how you would respond to your security incidents manually. Walk them through that process a few times manually. When you think you've got it down pat and you understand the workflow and the things that need to happen, that's when you bring in your engineers and start writing the code that would actually automate your response to a particular security incident. And then once you have that really understood and implemented and working well when it comes to automation, you rinse and repeat. You go back and find the next thing that needs attention and walk that through. Make sure you understand all the manual steps that need to happen. Once you have those nailed down, automate them and put them into place. And I feel that once you do this over time, is that you'll start finding that your precious security and operational resources are able to start, one, getting more sleep because more things are happening, because we all know that this all happens in the middle of the night, that more things are happening while they're sleeping and getting addressed, and they have more time to actually invest in bigger company-related items, doing deeper forensics into the actual security issues, or working with your application teams to actually ensure that they are architecting and implementing security into what they're building from the beginning, resulting in potentially less detections later on. So with that, we've talked about GuardDuty. We've talked about supercharging with GuardDuty Partners and the ways that we can scale. And I think we've probably eliminated a few moles along the way. Would you say, Pat?
Yeah, I would say so, Scott.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. Anything else to add, Pat?
That's all. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Hey, thanks everybody for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll stick around here for questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shout out your questions or come on down.